After some years apart, Claire and Miles found each other again amidst Charleston's blue tides, not under rain, but beneath moonlight, witnessing love bloom from ashes. He kissed her, not to erase the past, but to paint their future. A secret once divided them, yet love has healed it all, sweet and eternal. Welcome, dear family, to Soul and Love Stories. How are you today? I hope your heart blazes with love, your eyes shimmer with hope, and your soul resonates with beautiful tales. Wherever you are, you're not alone. I'm here with you on this quest for true love. Let's ignite a small prayer. God of love, touch every heart here today. Kindle their passion, heal their wounds, and guide them to the love stories you've destined. May unexpected joy flood in, turning sorrow to smiles, and may love forever blossom within them. Amen. Soul and Love Stories family, did you adore Claire and Miles' journey? We're building a home for love, aiming for 1,000 subscribers. It's not just a number, it's our dream, a community where love triumphs. I need you. Just one subscribe from you brings us closer. Let's create a miracle together, uniting 1,000 souls in love's embrace. Now step into the next story with me. Claire Carter stepped out of the car, her suitcase in tow, the soles of her low-ankle boots striking Charleston's ground with a crisp clack. The sea breeze whipped through her voluminous curls, carrying the briny scent of salt and a memory she tried to bury. Miles Sullivan standing under the rain 10 years ago, his eyes broken as she turned and walked away without a word. It had been 3 years since she last set foot here, and this visit was meant to be a brief escape from the avalanche of blueprints burying her desk in Atlanta. Draping her favorite vintage coat over her shoulders, she couldn't shake the question, would Charleston let her rest? She decided to stop by Tide and Time, a new seaside cafe she'd stumbled across online. Its name felt like a murmur of fate, perfectly aligned with her taste. The glass door jingled as she entered, greeted by a blend of elegance and warmth. Glossy wooden tables, delicate crystal chandeliers casting soft light, and the rich, roasted scent of coffee enveloping her like a comforting hug. She chose a spot near the window, where the endless blue sea unfurled before her eyes, and had just set her bag down when a figure emerged from behind the counter. Her heart stopped. Miles Sullivan, her college love, the one she'd loved fiercely, then abandoned without explanation. But this Miles was different. His hair neatly cropped, white shirt sleeves rolled up to reveal toned arms, his gaze sharp yet tinged with mystery. A millionaire like him, working a coffee counter? The rumors of him retreating here to hide weren't a jest after all. Miles glanced up, locking eyes with her. For a fleeting moment, his hand clenched the porcelain cup he held, but then he turned away, coolly pretending to fuss with the coffee machine. Claire bit her lip, her pulse hammering. He probably doesn't recognize me, she told herself, though the way he avoided her gaze screamed otherwise. Clearing her throat, she steadied her voice. "A latte, please." His reply came sharp and dry. "Still like it sugar-free, don't you?" The question sliced through her, yanking her back to those college mornings when he'd brew coffee for her in their cramped apartment, sunlight spilling through the window. She froze, managing only a slight nod. Moments later, he placed the latte before her. Etched in the foam was a small message. "Lost your way, darling." Claire nearly laughed, but her throat tightened. That subtle, sly humor. Pure Miles, the kind she'd once fallen for. She looked up, words forming, but he'd already turned, wiping the counter with stiff, mechanical motions. The air grew thick with awkwardness, the crash of waves outside drowning her racing heartbeat. Sipping the bitter latte, memories surged. She'd left him behind, and now fate had thrust them together again. This getaway, she realized, would be anything but simple. After the awkward encounter at Tide and Time, Claire resolved to steer clear of Miles by throwing herself into work. She'd just landed a project to restore an old mansion on the outskirts of Charleston, the perfect chance to erase his piercing gaze from her mind. The house exuded antebellum charm, towering white columns, intricately wrought iron balconies, and windows draped with ivy like curtains of time. Claire was instantly captivated, already envisioning how she'd preserve its timeless elegance while weaving in her signature vintage flair. She arrived to meet the owner, brimming with excitement, until the door swung open, revealing Miles Sullivan leaning against the frame, clad in a impeccably tailored gray suit. "Welcome to my house, Carter," he said, his tone a mix of jest and mockery. Claire froze, her grip tightening on her sketches until the paper crumpled. "Your house? I thought you were just renting or something?" Miles smirked, stepping closer, his breath carrying the faint scent of sandalwood from expensive cologne. "I bought it, a little investment, and now you're standing on my turf." Claire swallowed hard, struggling to maintain her professionalism. "Fine. If you approve my design, I'll start right away." But Miles wasn't so accommodating. He crossed his arms, a mischievous glint in his eyes. "I've got a condition. This Saturday, there's a charity event in town, a fancy auction for donations. Locals peg me as the arrogant millionaire, so I need you to play my girlfriend, soften the gossip." Claire's jaw dropped. "What? I'm an architect, not some Hollywood actress." Miles shrugged, unfazed. "No deal, no contract. Your call." Claire gritted her teeth, knowing how vital this project was to her career. "Fine," she snapped, "but I get full control over the house's decor. No meddling." Miles nodded, a fleeting smirk crossing his lips. "Deal." The next day, their act began. Miles took Claire to a luxurious boutique where she emerged in a classic emerald dress, knee-length and hugging her slender frame. Miles stared, pausing for a beat, then turned away, muttering, "It'll do." Claire pursed her lips. "Thanks for the half-hearted compliment, Sullivan." Then came his turn. She insisted on a navy suit over his boring black choice. They bickered fiercely. Claire quipped he'd look like a botched James Bond in black, while Miles shot back, "What do you know about style, vintage junkie?" Their spat dissolved into stifled giggles, though neither admitted it. That evening at the mansion, Miles summoned Claire for a rehearsal. He uncorked an expensive bottle of red wine, pouring her a glass. "If you're playing my girlfriend, you should know what I like," he said, taking a sip. Claire tasted it, wrinkling her nose. "Too bitter. Don't you have anything simpler?" Miles chuckled, his first genuine laugh since their reunion, a flicker of curiosity in his eyes. "You still hate wine, huh?" Claire flushed, realizing he remembered her old habits. Just then the door burst open, and a tall man strode in, clapping Miles on the shoulder. "Sullivan, finally tying the knot? Introduce me to the wife." Claire nearly choked on her wine, coughing violently, while Miles sputtered, face reddening. "No, she's Claire. Just a partner," he stammered. The man winked. "Sure, a partner you look at like that?" He roared with laughter and left, leaving the air thick with tension. Claire met Miles' gaze, her heart pounding, and though he turned away, a trace of warmth lingered in his eyes, impossible to hide. They both knew this game was slipping beyond their control. The charity event swept in like a sea breeze, pulling Claire into a whirlwind she wasn't ready for. That night in the mansion's living room, she stood before the mirror, adjusting her emerald dress one last time, her stomach fluttering with nerves. Miles appeared behind her, wearing the navy suit she'd picked out, looking both sophisticated and oddly approachable. "Ready, girlfriend?" he asked, his teasing tone laced with a hint of warmth. Claire shot him a glance through the mirror, smirking. "Don't get your hopes up, Sullivan. I'm only here for the contract." But when he extended his hand, she took it, the heat from his touch spreading through her, making her heart race faster than she cared to admit. The town hall glowed with golden light, its tables adorned with gleaming porcelain and sparkling crystal. Miles introduced Claire to the crowd, his hand resting lightly on her back, a gesture so natural she almost forgot it was pretend. They bid on an old painting together, bickering softly like a real couple. "It's worth $500 tops," Claire whispered. Miles scoffed. "You don't know art. I'm going 2,000. He won the piece, then tilted his head toward her, voice softening. "It's yours. Hang it in the mansion." Claire blushed, fumbling for a response but finding none. The real surprise came when Miles' parents arrived. The Sullivans, wealthy yet warm, recognized Claire instantly. "Oh my goodness, Claire! Still as lovely as ever," Mrs. Sullivan exclaimed, enveloping her in a tight hug. Mr. Sullivan clapped Miles on the shoulder, winking. "Well done, son. I knew you wouldn't let her slip away again." Claire squirmed, flustered, while Miles coughed, trying to shift the topic. Over dinner, Mrs. Sullivan beamed, sharing a tidbit. "He kept that bracelet you made him all these years, Claire. Wore it until the cord frayed." Miles frowned. "Mom, don't bring that up." But his gaze softened as it met Claire's, as if the memory of that bracelet, a gift she'd crafted during a rainy college afternoon, flooded back, tugging at his heart. After the event, they strolled along the beach, moonlight scattering silver across the waves, the gentle crash of the tide soothing the air. Miles popped open a bottle of champagne he'd brought, pouring them each a glass. "To surviving tonight," he said, clinking his glass against hers. Claire took a sip, giggling as the bubbles tickled her nose into a sneeze. "I still hate champagne more than wine," she admitted. Miles watched her, his eyes deep and unguarded. "I remember how you'd scrunch your nose at anything you didn't like. Hasn't changed since college." His voice trailed off, as if he'd said too much, and Claire felt his breath draw closer, the woody scent of his cologne leaving her momentarily dazed. The space between them shrank. Their lips hovered mere inches apart, gazes locked, the air humming like a taut string. Claire held her breath, certain he'd kiss her, but Miles froze, his grip tightening on the glass until his knuckles whitened. Inside, a voice screamed, "I can't let her leave again. I can't take that pain." He turned away, voice hoarse. "It's late. Let's head back." Claire nodded, her heart pounding, torn between relief and longing. They walked back to the mansion, side by side, silent. Yet both felt the old emotions surging, fierce, undeniable, impossible to suppress. Claire told herself it was just the afterglow of their roles, but deep down, she knew her heart was slipping out of rhythm for him once more. In the days following their evening by the beach, the air between Claire and Miles grew heavy, thick with the tension of an impending storm. They still worked together at the mansion, Claire measuring and sketching, Miles approving expenses. But the laughter that once punctuated their interactions had vanished, replaced by a strained silence. Claire told herself this was for the best, that she couldn't let history repeat itself. Yet every time Miles's hand brushed hers as he handed over a document, or their eyes met for a fleeting moment, her heart trembled, defying all reason. Everything shattered on the night of the town's grandest charity gala, hosted by the mayor in a lavish hall. Miles had asked Claire to join him, not as part of their charade, but because he genuinely wanted her there. She wore a wine-red silk dress, her hair cascading loosely, looking like she'd stepped out of an old painting. Miles, in a sleek black suit, gazed at her with eyes both tender and anguished. They entered the event hand in hand, but Claire could sense the tension radiating from him, taut as a string about to snap. Beneath a shimmering chandelier, they danced, their bodies so close she could hear his steady breathing. An elderly guest chuckled, teasing, "When are you two having kids to carry on the Sullivan legacy?" Miles forced a smile, about to brush it off, when Claire blurted out, "I can't have children." The words shot out like a bullet, irreversible. The air around them froze. Miles stared at her, eyes wide, voice trembling. "What?" Panicked, Claire dragged him to the balcony, away from the prying eyes now fixed on them. Under a star-strewn sky, the sea breeze cutting through, she confessed everything. 10 years ago, I found out I was infertile. I was terrified you wouldn't accept it, that I wasn't enough for you, someone who always dreamed of a big family. So I left." Tears streamed down her cheeks, her voice breaking. Miles stood rigid, his hands gripping the railing, his face shadowed. "You didn't trust me enough to stay," he said, each word sharp as a blade. "What did you think I was? Some guy obsessed with money and lineage?" Claire shook. "I didn't want you to sacrifice for me." Miles stepped forward, eyes red-rimmed. "Sacrifice? Claire, you were my dream. You never gave me the chance to choose you." His words pierced her heart, but then a memory surged back. The previous afternoon, Mrs. Sullivan had pulled her aside, whispering, He turned down another proposal, Claire, because he was still waiting for you. The revelation stunned her, realization crashing in. She hadn't just abandoned him. She'd unknowingly trapped him in a decade of pain. I can't do this anymore, Miles said, voice hoarse, turning away. Claire sobbed. I'm sorry, Miles, but I'm scared I'll ruin you again. With nothing left to say, she fled the hall, tears blurring the lights behind her. That night, in the small hotel she'd rented, Claire packed her things, her hands trembling as she folded each piece of clothing into her suitcase. She couldn't face him, couldn't bear that wounded look in his eyes any longer. On Miles's desk, she left the mansion's blueprints and a note. Thank you for everything. I'm sorry. Her flight out of Charleston departed at 7 a.m. As the plane cut through the sky, she peered out the window at the town fading below, wondering if she'd just walked away from the most precious thing in her life once again. Back at the mansion, Miles stood alone, clutching her note. His fingers crushed the paper, a single tear splashing onto the wooden floor. The agony of 10 years ago returned, sharper than ever, but this time he knew he couldn't let it end like this. Claire sat on the plane, gazing out the window as Charleston faded beneath a blanket of white clouds. She clutched her handkerchief, silent tears slipping down her cheeks. Leaving was the right choice, she told herself. But why did her chest feel hollow, as if a piece had been carved out? Meanwhile, back at the mansion, Miles stood motionless before his desk, holding the note Claire had left behind. Thank you for everything. I'm sorry. Her soft handwriting twisted into his heart like a dagger. He tossed the paper aside, running a hand through his hair, his breathing ragged. 10 years ago, he'd let her slip away. This time, he couldn't live with that regret any longer. Miles bolted outside, leaping into the sleek black Bentley parked out front. He called his assistant, voice urgent. Find Claire Carter's flight. It left Charleston this morning. Hurry. Minutes later, the response came. Her plane would land in Atlanta, but it had a brief stop in Savannah for refueling. Miles floored the gas, racing to his private airstrip where a small Cessna awaited. Get me to Savannah. Now! He barked, his heart pounding as if it might burst from his chest. At Savannah's airport, Claire dragged her suitcase through the concourse, her mind a fog. She didn't hear the distant roar of an engine until a voice cut through the noise. Claire, wait! She turned, stunned to see Miles sprinting toward her, his suit jacket askew, arms flailing, until his phone slipped from his grip, clattering to the floor with a loud thud. He stumbled, nearly falling, but shouted again, Don't go! The crowd around them chuckled, some pointing, but Claire stood rooted, tears blurring her vision, hardly believing he was here. Miles skidded to a stop before her, breathless, hair tousled by the wind. Miles? What are you doing here? She asked, voice trembling. He grabbed her hands, pulling her close, his eyes resolute. I don't need a perfect blueprint, Claire. I don't need an empire or a legacy. I just need you. You're the only design that matters in my life. His words, sincere and tied to her passion for architecture, felt like a confession crafted just for her. Claire shook her head, tears spilling over. But I can't give you... He cut her off, voice gentle. All I want is you. We'll build something new, together. Beneath the early sunlight streaming through the airport's glass ceiling, Miles leaned down and kissed her. It was sweet, fierce, a promise they'd waited a decade to fulfill. Claire wrapped her arms around him, tears mingling with her smile. The crowd erupted in applause, a few whistles piercing the air, but they didn't care. The world had shrunk to just the two of them. 3 months later, the old mansion stood complete, transformed into a boutique hotel named Blue Tide, a nod to their first meeting beneath Charleston's azure waves 10 years prior. Claire turned it into a vintage masterpiece while Miles funded it fully, granting her creative freedom. On opening day, they stood at the entrance, hands entwined, gazing at the intricately carved wooden sign, Blue Tide, where love begins. Guests streamed in, but Claire leaned her head on Miles' shoulder, whispering, Thank you for chasing me. He kissed her hair, smiling. Thank you for letting me catch you. That night on the rooftop beneath twinkling lanterns, they danced. Claire wore her emerald dress, Miles his trusty navy suit. The distant crash of waves blended with their laughter, a melody that never faltered. Charleston had seen them part, and now it cradled their reunion, sweet, complete, and everlasting. 1 year after their reunion, Blue Tide had become the heart of Charleston, cozy and enchanting with Claire's vintage touch. Today, the summer charity festival buzzed on the rooftop, raising funds for local children. Claire bustled about, directing the decor team, while Miles manned the outdoor bar, mixing cocktails with a radiant smile. Suddenly, Biscuit, their curly-haired poodle sporting a diamond-studded collar, darted in, snapping the string of lights, plunging the terrace into darkness. Guests cheered, and Miles laughed, pulling Claire into an impromptu dance beneath the moonlight, turning the mishap into a cherished moment. Though they had no children of their own, they found joy in teaching, baking, and home decorating to coastal kids every weekend. A shy girl, Lily, approached, pressing a drawing into Claire's hands. 2 figures, a dog, and the word family scrawled unevenly. Claire's eyes welled up, and Miles hugged her from behind, his warmth steadying her. As the sunset painted the sea red, she asked, "Did you ever imagine us like this?" Miles smiled, his voice low and warm. "No, but I'm glad you rebuilt the home in my heart." Hand in hand, they knew this love was everything. Claire and Miles' love triumphed under Charleston's moonlight, healing a decade of wounds, binding them forever. A secret once divided them. Now it's their eternity. Dear Soul and Love Stories family, thanks for being here. Did their tale warm your heart? We're crafting a romance haven, aiming for 1,000 subscribers, 1,000 hearts united in love. Hit subscribe to join me in weaving more beautiful stories. One click lifts us higher, spreading love wider. Loved it? Comment your favorite moment. Hit like and share with someone special. Together, we'll spark magic. See you next time, where love always finds home.